Hello there friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. In our last episode, we discussed the possibility of the Kaminoans rebelling against the Empire after the discontinuation of the Clone Trooper program. Creating clone troopers for the JAR made up the majority of Kamino's economic output. We believe that one of the main storylines in the Bad Batch will therefore focus on this uneasy transition from clone troopers to stormtroopers. Today we'll be taking a look at 8 disadvantages that the stormtroopers have that the clone troopers do not. One of the main reasons why Tarkin and the Emperor are looking to replace the clone trooper program is its lengthy and costly production cycle. A clone takes 9 years to mature, and that means the Republic has to pay for 9 years of food, shelter, and training. While no training can truly prepare you for a combat situation, enough training will condition you to have better outcomes. The Stormtroopers, which were considered elite shock troopers for the Imperial military, had at most 2 years of training, usually at an Imperial academy. This is actually considered quite a long time for a civilian soldier, as Navy and Army troopers will only have basic training, which usually lasts just a few months. That's just about enough training to teach an individual some basic blaster safety and how to fight from a prepared position. The focus on cost efficiency and time of training ultimately allows the Empire to increase its military size, but it does create inferior soldiers to the elite Grand Army of the Republic. The Stormtrooper is essentially a level 10 noob that is venturing out of the starter area for the first time, whereas a clone trooper is deployed completely ready for all that endgame content, including raids and dungeons and all that fun stuff. I've picked up many hobbies and skills throughout my life, and what I've noticed is the younger I am when I start something, the more natural it usually becomes. Then there are things I picked up in my 20s, like snowboarding and riding motorcycles. Compared to my friends who picked up these hobbies when they were just kids, I'm way behind them. It's a lot harder to learn things when you're much older. There's something to be said about the fact that the clones are trained literally from birth to be soldiers. While they might have advanced aging during those crucial development years when an Imperial civilian is learning how to walk, talk, and socialize, the clone babies are receiving flash training and playing milsims to prepare themselves for a life of warfare. The level of proficiency in every one of these clones is just much higher, and many of the skills that they have are baked in during a human's most impressionable years, when they're young. Just another reason why the clone trooper is obviously superior to a stormtrooper. Most militaries in the world just have their soldiers go through some basic training, which usually lasts a few weeks or months, and then you go on to deployment or you become specialized in some other area. The clone troopers also specialize, but the reality is 9 years of training is almost overkill. And so during this time period, clone troopers actually familiarize themselves with every vehicle and weapon system in the entire GAR. These crazy kids have the equivalent of several masters and PhDs in the art of killing things. It wasn't uncommon for a clone to be deployed in a variety of different missions throughout their career. Commander Wolf, who we previously mentioned in our Best Clone Officers video, could do just about anything. He's commanded entire Republic fleets, he's led special forces and commando missions, and he's also commanded entire armies during grander campaigns. Commander Wolf has even flown starfighters on sorties. This is what you get with the clones. They are extremely well trained and can do almost anything you want them to do on the battlefield. During the Battle of Umbara, 3 clones were somehow able to figure out how to fly an alien starship and then somehow managed to use these to destroy an enemy capital ship. None of them were trained as pilots. The same thing happened during the Battle of Coruscant. Because there was a shortage of starfighter pilots, many infantry soldiers were actually put into starfighters and engaged the enemy over the planet. I mean, this is kind of the flexibility the clones give you, and because battle plans usually change the second the battle starts, having that kind of flexibility is really a big plus. From the very beginning, the Empire tried to make the Stormtroopers extremely obedient to the Empire. One way they did this was by removing the individuality of each Stormtrooper. They replaced their names with numbers and monitored their helmets' comm systems. This made it extremely hard for Stormtroopers to develop meaningful relationships within their squad. The clones, however, trended the opposite way. Identity became quite important in a sea of familiar faces. But that individuality only strengthened the clone's individual purpose. It didn't weaken the bond each clone felt for one another. Clones were literally brothers to one another. More importantly, many of these clone troopers were raised from birth in the same unit, and so these individuals aren't just fighting alongside friends and allies, they're fighting alongside family. Training and living with the same people for a long period of time does wonders for unit cohesion and how coordinated they are on the battlefield. Another reason why the clone troopers were elite. Now, Star Wars does a good job highlighting individuals like Captain Rex and the Bad Batch as good examples of clones refusing to follow orders. But the reality is, Order 66 was widely successful. There were only a handful of cases in which clones hesitated or refused to gun down their Jedi. This terrifying obedience is bred into the clones, but also reinforced by the inhibitor chip. There are some rumors that Emperor Palpatine feared that these inhibitor chips would one day be used against him, but the reality is these inhibitor chips did make the clones far more loyal than a Stormtrooper ever could be. When we see Admiral Rampart's first elite squad of troopers, we can tell that the Galactic Empire has a long way to go before figuring out how to properly condition these soldiers to ensure obedience. Rampart's elite squad immediately has problems during their first mission. One of the soldiers attempts to do a mutiny, and he is immediately executed by clone marksman Crosshair. Aside from the Bad Batch, every clone trooper was more or less the same size. This means everything from their armor to the seats inside their starfighters could be custom made for just the clone troopers. This means increased comfort and usability for the clones and decrease in cost for the JAR. Also, because everyone wears the same size, you're not going to have too many extra smalls or too many triple XLs. Everything will fit perfectly. One of the reasons why the clone army was such an effective fighting force is because the entire clone army was made up of individuals who were completely isolated from the rest of the galaxy. Clones don't really have families outside of the JAR, and they don't have any homeworld that they want to go back to. Everything they cared about and cared for could be found within the Grand Army of the Republic. Their family was their fellow brothers, their home was either a capital ship or their home planet of Kamino, which served as a place for retraining and R&R. When the Separatist Alliance attacked Kamino, the clones didn't see this as an attack against the most strategically important world in the Republic. They saw it as a personal attack against the place they were born. A clone's ambitions are pretty simple. It's to protect his brothers and to protect the Grand Army of the Republic. His ambitions directly line up with the Republic's. When it comes to Stormtroopers, however, you're dealing with normal people. Many of them come to service for different reasons. Some troopers might join the service because they legitimately believe in the Empire, but for most, it was either just a job or a way off a boring world. Most Stormtroopers have dreams about what they want to do after service, and that's because they've experienced life before being in the Corps. The clones, however, were born into service, and they didn't know anything else. They were institutionalized. This means that many didn't even think about or even want to leave the Grand Army of the Republic. There were no outside distractions, only an intense focus on becoming the best soldiers possible. Most clones have a ridiculous amount of combat tours underneath their belt. This is due to a lack of human rights and representation. Clones were constantly being ferried from one battle to another. The first batch of clones, because of manpower shortages, were basically involved in constant combat for months without relief. The Empire would actually utilize the clones to train the Stormtroopers because their wealth of knowledge and combat experience. But once the Clone Wars ended, the amount of conflict decreased significantly across the galaxy. Instead of having complicated grand campaigns that involved multiple fleets and multiple ground forces and planetary invasions, post-Clone Wars battles were mostly asymmetric. Rebels and bandits would carry out guerrilla warfare against Imperial garrisons stationed across the galaxy. This lack of actual battle experience would plague the Stormtrooper Corps, especially in its early years. Even by the time the New Hope arrives, the Stormtrooper Corps was still a relatively young military organization, and even though it has superior firepower and support, the Stormtrooper Corps struggled to put down the rebellion. So there you have it, guys. 8 different reasons why the clone troopers are actually superior to the stormtroopers. And I think the fact that Palpatine chooses to use the stormtrooper shows us that what he needs in his new military is definitely not as demanding as what the Republic needed when facing the Separatist Alliance. Let me know in the comment section below if I've missed any other disadvantages that the stormtroopers have. I'm sure there are plenty that you guys can find. Anyway, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. As usual, thanks for joining us today. If you're watching this, you are Generation Tech.